Welcome to Dr. Chris's show here, WCUW Radio of Horror. Tonight on the show with us, we're going to be covering some mystery novels with a famous comic book writer who's now delving into a whole new genre of writing over the last several years. Still writes comic books, but he has kind of changed focus a lot. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, I'm Fabian Nicieza. I've been a writer for 35 years, mostly in comic books, but also video games, animation, and now prose novels.
Video games was something else that was new to me when I was looking up just to see what else you have been doing over the last time period.
It was always background stuff. It was always working with companies to world build their story worlds, and several times script rewrites on gameplay script, but never anything major. The major jobs were really background work. We worked on Halo. We worked on Halo for like a year, but that was really behind the scenes. It wasn't actually up for the production of the game, using all the work we did to feed into their stories moving forward. And they have. Microsoft has done that over the last 10 years. I mean, we worked on Halo like in 2008, I think it was, 2009.
But you're also credited like a writer on the Deadpool game, the Lego Marvel superheroes, or is that just based on characters?
I don't know where any of that comes from, other than maybe being co-creator of Deadpool. I didn't work on any of that stuff.
Okay, I think it's because Deadpool's in those games, and you will always get a co-creator credit with it. So
yeah. Okay, I'll take it.
Hey, at least
take credits wherever you can.
At least your name didn't show up on the Deadpool board in the movie saying Fabian sucks.
They did a highway sign with my name on it.
They did? Oh, okay.
In the first movie.
That's cool.
Yeah. That in the first movie, it was a highway sign with my name on it that was there.
Somebody's a fan. That's good.
Yeah, I don't. That kind of stuff does. Honestly, that stuff does nothing for me. It really doesn't. The what really matters to me is that I get the check when the year the movie comes out. That I get that check. That's what matters to me.
That's good. That's good. When did you start getting into becoming a mystery writer? Because your last novel, I believe, was The Self-Made Widow.
Yeah, Self-Made Widow came out last year.
Okay.
It's an interesting story because I had the ideas for both books, featuring the same character set in the same New Jersey suburban town, just two different mysteries, they're set about 11 months apart. I had the idea for Suburban Dicks, my first book, in 1995. And I had the idea for Self-Made Widow in about 2 years, a year and a half later. And each of them were predicated on things that were happening in my real life that I just extrapolated, like in a ridiculous fashion, into fiction. I tried writing Suburban Dicks as a prose novel about 3-4 times over the ensuing 15-20 years. And I just was never happy with what I did. And then in late 2017, I just made a decision. I saw that a lot of fellow comic book writers had just sold a variety of different novels in different genres. And it was really just jealousy and anger that really fueled me to say, I have to finish a book that I start, or else I'm never gonna be satisfied with myself as a writer. And I just started working on it, and I wrote it all through 2018 on the side. It was always a side thing because it had no destination. I had no agent at the time. I had no publisher at the time. I just wanted to write the end on a manuscript. And through the course of writing it, I got good feedback from people who were looking at it for me. They were very encouraging. I started to really feel good about it. Probably about a third of the way through, I said, hey, wait a minute, this isn't so bad. This is okay. It's coming along. And then an agent got interested in it because he really liked the basic concept and idea of the book. And that agent managed to get multiple publishers interested in buying the manuscript. So it went from something I was doing mostly for myself with the hope that maybe I might sell it to a small publisher to get a paperback book out of it. And it turned into a 2-book deal with a major publisher like Putnam, and the whole hardcover treatment and everything else. So it was a pretty entertaining, interesting, fun ride. Ultimately, it really just began with me wanting to finally finish a prose manuscript that I began.
Out of curiosity, what is a manufacturing assistant? Because that's how you got started.
I worked my first job at Berkeley Putnam Publishing in 1983 was in the production department, and then I went. I got promoted 6 months later as assistant managing editor. My first job at Marvel Comics, which was 1985, was as a manufacturing assistant, and basically the manufacturing department of publishers are the ones who generally get the material out to a separator and a printer and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of what I did in production at Berkeley Publishing. My job was to get the manuscript from the managing editor's department, which had already gone through copy editing and vetting it and preparing it for me, and then I would send it out to the typesetter. Back then, there were typesetters.
Wow!
and the typesetters would set the type and send us back galleys, and then I'd get that back up to managing editorial, who would have it all proofread and checked and run it through editorial. So it's all different levels of being a middleman, you know? So I went from production to managing editorial, whose job it was to work with editorial on the schedule, get the material, and get it prepared for production. And I did that for 2 years, from 83 to 85, when a job opportunity popped up at Marvel. And I didn't want to be in the manufacturing department of Marvel's book division, because back then they didn't even really have comic book trade paperbacks or hardcovers. They really only had a deal with Fisher-Price, a licensing deal with Fisher-Price, to make coloring books and sticker books and activity books and all that kind of stuff, which Marvel had never really done before. So they developed a small manufacturing department for Marvel books solely because of that licensing deal. And the woman hired me to be her assistant. And I only did it for 4 months because an opportunity popped up to work in the promotions department. And that's what I really wanted to do, because I went to college for communications, public relations, and advertising. So I really wanted to be in the promotions department for Marvel, because I really thought the opportunity to work in that department would really get my foot in the door better and give me a better chance to do the kinds of things I wanted to do, which was right, but not only right. I also wanted to advance my position in the company, as it were. So within a year, I was Marvel's advertising manager. That was like in 1986. And my job was to make all the ads that you saw in the comic books for the comic books. So all the house ads, all the promotional posters that went to comic book retail stores, any kind of publication ads that ran in the fanzines like Comic Buyer's Guide or Amazing Heroes or Comic Shop News. My job was to make all of that stuff, write the copy, work with a design, an outside design group at that time, to create the mechanicals and get the ads finished and ready for publication.
Wow, that's incredible. I never think about who's writing those. How do those ads get in the book besides them just being like, we'll pay for an ad, we'll put it in the comic book, which is something, God, not to get too much far into current comics, but you think the price of comic books would come down if they started running ads again for Procter & Gamble stuff or movies or video games and things like that, whatever they used to run.
Theoretically, the answer is yes, but in practicality, the answer is no, because the reason they lost those advertisers is because they didn't have the circulation numbers that would allow them to generate pricing ads at $40,000 a page or $20,000 a page,
right.
which is what they did back then. And in my day, they would sell 8 pages of ads in every book, because it was a 32-page book with 24 pages of editorial content, including not just the comic book pages, but like a letters page, a bullpen bulletins page, a subscription ad. So we would get 8 pages. 8 pages would automatically be reserved for advertising. And the guy who used to run the ad sales was usually basically done with his job for the year by the end of February. because you sell ad flats in quarterly groupings. So every 3 months, if you look back on the old comics, every 3 months the ads were the same for 3 months in a row. Then there'd be new ads for 3 months in a row, and the guy would sell the entire year's worth of ad flats usually by February, March. So then he'd spend half his year just going out golfing.
Oh, wow.
Because ultimately he didn't have more pages to sell, so it's not like he couldn't do his job. He'd already done his job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just the circulation of the books back then was much higher. So when you combine the ad placement in all the comics, you're getting your ad in 1 million plus comics that are selling a month.
Well, and I reference that because I'm looking at 2 issues of Captain America in my hand. I have one from 1992 ish Captain America number 405, which is the debut of Capwolf by the late great Mark Grunwald, which I'll get into a comment about in that towards the end of this. And then I have Capwolf and the Howling Commandos number 1, and just kind of looking through it and going, what happened to the house ads? Why don't they put those in there again and bring down the price of the comic book? Because there's only one ad in here that's not like Marvel related, and it's for the Citizen Watch, but it's like with artwork by I forgot his name, and I just met him too. He's doing all the Citizen Watch ads for Marvel. He worked on like Space Ghost and Avengers: The Last Story. The name is killing me right now. It's on the tip of my tongue. And again, I just met him too, because I pointed out to him saying, "Hey, you're doing the ads for the quartz for Marvel." And he's like, "Yeah, that's been great." It's just basically painting, just making a painting, and then they stick all the stuff over it or whatever with the advertised quartz wristwatches based on whatever character it happens to be. Thor, the Avengers, Loki is the ones I've seen. But I digress. Do you at some point want to just be a book author and just completely leave comic books? Because you said you have done at least one thing a year in comics, but it's obviously a lot less than what you were doing in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, but look at what you just said. It's a lot more than what you were doing in the 90s and 2000s. It's 2023. I stopped focusing on comics as my only source of income 20 years ago. I was doing franchise management for Hollywood studios and video game companies and toy companies. That's the Halo job I told you about. I was doing animation Bibles for animated series that never sold, because after you write a Bible, they got to try to raise money. One finally did just a couple of years ago that got turned into a one season of cartoons that ran on some Cartoon Channel app. I developed a Stan Lee Arnold Schwarzenegger property for them, and they made like 13 episodes of it. I think at least barely paid attention because that was the same exact time as my first book was coming out, so that's what I was really focusing on. I've always juggled a variety of different kinds of writing, mostly because it's the safest way to make your yearly nut that you have to make. And the other side of the coin is I thought it would drive me crazy if I only did one kind of writing. I thought it would be a detriment to me mentally and in terms of my creativity if I only was chasing comic books. Without really good sales in order to generate incentives like we used to in the 90s, writing comic books is a really challenging proposition in order to do enough in order to make a living. You're only getting a page rate if you're not getting royalties. So 90% of the time when I write comics now, it's mostly just for fun. I'm not doing it because that's the income that I need to earn to fill one bucket. And I gotta get enough water into each of those different buckets every year. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm working on a third book right now, a new book right now. But I'm also working on a miniseries for Marvel, and I'm also working on an Image comic book that's coming out next year. And I was doing a webtoon comic for the years with Riley Brown called Outrage. We had 2 seasons of 50 chapters each season for Outrage. Riley Brown and I worked on Cable and Deadpool together for years. So I've always had my finger in the pie. I had an exclusive contract. I could only write for DC from like 2008 to 2013. And that's when I was writing Red Robin and a whole bunch of other stuff for them. So I've always kept my finger in the pie, but it was never It was never my main thing. Because making it your main thing really means you have to write 4 to 5 monthly books in order to make enough money to be able to pay your mortgage and to be able to pay your kids' way through college, et cetera, et cetera. Writing 4 to 5 monthly books is not easy. Very, very few people do that, right?
Yeah. How many? And you were writing you were writing a couple books at the same time in the 90s?
In the 90s, in the early 90s, I was writing 6 monthly books with a full-time job.
Oh, Jesus.
But the difference was those monthly books were selling.
Yeah,
7 million copies a month.
Something with an X on it was selling, that's for sure.
Everything was selling, quite frankly. My lowest selling title was Nomad, and even that was selling 45,000 copies. So the numbers aren't comparable then to now. They really aren't.
Wow, Nomad sold that many copies. That's unbelievable. I did. That was not a book I picked up. I had to really like backtrack into who I almost said Kurt Russell. No, that's his son who played him. Because you think of that character, and he's like, no, wait, that was John Walker. There's too many Captain Americas, damn it.
Way too many.
And it's like, did you guys remember there was this Captain America in the annual number 2000 or whatever? Last time we saw him, he was on the back of a pickup truck. Oh, what about the Captain America that split off from Steve Rogers in that Hydra storyline where he goes, Hail Hydra? He's still around in the throes of Hydra. And then what about Isaiah Bradley? Have they even mentioned him lately? No. It's like, things like that.
I long for the good old days of the mid-'70s when there was only 2 to me. But second of all, Jack Monroe, who was Nomad, was never Captain America.
He was Bucky.
He was Bucky of the 1950s, but the minute that Mark DeMatteis brought him back after Steve Englehart had reintroduced him in the 70s, he was Nomad. He became Nomad really early on. Like, he was Nomad in the very early 80s. So he was never Captain America, not once.
I think it was Nomad was just a little outside of my viewpoint in a book I wanted to pick up, whereas the New Warriors was like, hey, this is just like me.
Yeah, well, Nomad was an edgier book, and it was more of a crime violence, crime noir stories. It really wasn't a superhero book at all.
No,
it had a very loyal readers. I mean, it sold 40,000 copies for its 2-year run, and there are a lot of readers to this day that really like the book. The book meant a lot to them just because of the kinds of stories it was telling were not typical of what most mainstream Marvel books were doing.
Well, the book that I actually read, the first Captain America book, the first Captain America story I can ever remember reading before I started really digging into it. And I didn't start picking up regularly until Mark Waid took over with Ron Garney just before they got booted off the book and then came back on the book, was the Captain America Adventure prestige formats, I think they were. They were like bookshelves.
Well, I did one with Kevin McGuire called The Adventures of Captain America, Sentinel of Liberty.
Yeah. Is that what I'm thinking of?
4-issue. That was an Argent project that was meant to be out in time for Cap's 50th anniversary, and it was really kind of like an out-of-continuity retelling of his origin.
Yes, that was the first one I had read. You only did 1 issue of that?
No, it was 4 issues.
Oh, no, but you did all 4 issues.
Yeah, I wrote all 4 issues. Kevin was only able to draw 2.5 issues, but I wrote all 4.
That was I think that I saw that in a bookstore, and my knowledge of Captain America was basically just the character. I don't think, and this is memory in your 40s now, and when you're thinking about when you were 12 years old. I can't remember if I knew anything about Captain America other than I knew what he looked like and I knew what he stood for. Other than that, I don't even think I knew anything about like his backstory or the fact that he was called Steve Rogers at that point. You know what I mean? I had probably seen like one of those terrible movies from the 70s with that Christopher Lee was in. But I think that was honestly my first like pick this up and read it origin story for me of Captain America.
Well, I got to be honest with you, it's a pretty good book to start with.
Yeah, no, I love it. I absolutely love it. I was captured by the covers always being this like celluloid old school way of movie reels, and I really got into it pretty hardcore. And then I think I remember at one point when I actually did read the real origin of Captain America, I was like, that's not like the other thing I read. Yep. and then that's as I got older and understood like how comic books are written, timelines and things like that. Like when I was a kid, I would group every issue of Spider-Man together. So it doesn't matter if it was Spectacular Web of Amazing, whatever. It was always like, okay, I got to read this one, then this number, then this number, then this number. Not quite understanding that there was, different titles or something. So as I got older, I began to realize, oh, these are two different titles. Okay. And this origin is based on this origin and things like that. So.
Yeah. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so my comic book reading was a much simpler time. You went to the 7-Eleven and you saw whatever was there and you got it, and you hoped that every issue would come out every month because they didn't always land there on time. So if you missed an issue, you had to figure out a way to find it at another 7-Eleven.
Right, and that's why I say that I don't think there's anything inherently awful about digital comic books these days, because if you don't have a comic book store near you, in the digital Marvel, DC, whatever app it happens to be, but if you're going to wait till it comes out in trade, that's fine, that's one thing. But if you want to read it every month, the digital way to do it is the best way for you to keep up with it. I think that's okay, especially if you don't have a dedicated comic book store or a store that's like Newbury Comics, which is up here in New England, that will carry current issues and things like that. But since the grocery stores and Walmarts don't do that anymore, it's I think a good resource for people, because someone said I only read it digitally, and I was like, oh, why? And they said because my local comic book store sold his entire business to somebody a state away, and it's honestly it's a 2-hour drive to go buy comic books. Then I just can't. I don't want to do that, and everything. I pay for the subscription. I read almost
everything digitally now. It's just easier to access.
Do you have audiobooks based on your novels?
Both books were sold in audio version. Two different narrators for the two books, but they were both audio. They were both sold as audio books. Self-Made Widow sold in all three formats, as a hardcover, an audio book, and a paperback.
Uh-huh.
Self-Made Widow, Putnam released it as a hardcover and an audio book. They did not choose to do the paperback version of it, but Titan Books in UK did a paperback version of it. Titan also did Suburban Dicks for UK territories, but you can order it in paperback through the US if you go to the Titan site to get it. So there was audio dramas, two different narrators for each of the two books. They both did a good job, though. I liked them.
That's good, because sometimes I've heard authors have been like, I wouldn't have been the voice actor I chose, but I don't have a lot of say in the matter. And some voice actors are absolutely love that. It was like, if that was the person I would have picked, because I heard their other audiobooks. But that's good. You had a good feeling about the audiobooks.
Yeah, I'm not a big audiobook guy. I'm really not. I listened to some samples from a few different people that they sent me, and I said, and here's my ranking and my order of how I like their voice, their tone. The books have a bit of a sarcastic edge to them, but they also can get dark. So it has to be a narrator that is capable of having a bit of that edge to their voice. I did not want it to be softly narrated. And the two women who did the books were both professionals. They're very very busy, in demand audio narrators, so they did a good job.
Gotcha. Well, why don't you give away your social media information where people can find you?
You can always get me on X. I can't believe I just said that. It's Twitter. You can always get me on Twitter at Fabian Nicieza. You can always email me through my website, which is fabiannicieza.com. You go to the contact list and you can email me if you have any questions. My DMs are usually almost always open on Twitter. So if you're not a jerk about direct messaging me, I will respond. And you can get me on Facebook on Instant Messenger as well, even though my friends list is kind of full up right now.
Gotcha. Well, hey, man, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk a little bit about your novel career.
My pleasure.